to our second panel with leading teachers that are part of the Responsive4U project. Here it's my honor to introduce Dr. Diya, Mr. Chun Choy, and Professor Gina Marchetti. We're here to continue our discussion about their experience with the Responsive4U. And so following up from the previous panel, we just recognize that it's a lot of effort for professors to prepare for cross-institutional and blended teaching. And so are there any resources that you would recommend for teachers so that we could be better equipped for such kind of teaching, for whether it's Responsive4U or for any courses that you have?
Yeah, I think there are some really good resources available. It depends on your individual institution. It depends on the kind of class you have and what kind of blended learning you have that will work best with the cross-institutional initiative that we've got in place. So that's another issue. I mean, from my point of view, I have a massive open online course, which is the foundation for the kind of flipped classroom and blended learning that I use in my course on Hong Kong cinema. So that for some people, resources that are already available and pre-established really, to have there as a foundation is great. So using MOOCs or that kind of thing is something I think is not as utilized as often as perhaps it could be.
For our course, I think the support from our university and especially from Education Development Center is quite important. We're using the Blackboard and also use Panopto, and that's all something new for us. And so we attended several sessions introducing how to use those equipments and tools to better design, deliver the online courses. And I think another important resource would be the support from colleagues. Because sometimes people are talking about different tools or other things, other new things, fancy things that you could always learn. There's no end. But I think when you talk to your colleagues and you share your ideas and your exchange, even your feelings about the process, about everything, and you feel psychologically supported, and also you get ideas and feedback from others. So I think that the resources, people resources, human resources, from colleagues is very important as well.
So were there any resources that now looking back, now that you've kind of spent time designing your course, that you kind of think back and you're like, man, I wish I had this resource. I wish I had this available. It would help me to better prepare for my course. Are there things like that when you think back?
Well, I think that I have a frustration maybe related to that question, and that's the fact that we use so many different kinds of online materials and that they don't necessarily, the interface is not necessarily great. So you guys have Blackboard and Panopto, and we have Moodle, and we have Zoom, and we have Panopto, and I use a lot of online materials within my courses like Mentimeter I love. So there are all of these different kinds of materials available, but trying to integrate them is sometimes very difficult, particularly I'm finding now when we're completely online. Getting students to work through more than one type of, either learning management system or lecture capture system or surveying tool, what have you. Getting them each time that I work with them to learn the tools that I use, even though they seem to be simple, which they are, learning a new tool is always difficult. I mean, it would be great if we had a little bit more integration or a little bit more of a way of understanding how these different types of materials can work together more effectively.
For me, I wish that I could have this kind of discussion panel earlier if possible. Probably there is information available on Responsive4U project, but I haven't checked it, so I think that's on my side that I should change. Because when I got this task that I'm going to design and deliver this blended course, I really much focus on the core content itself. But if I could got a chance to have a discussion with teachers from other university, it would be great.
Yeah, I agree. The discussion panel would be most welcome, and also I think if we have a more standardized platform, it would be even better. For example, in HKU, students will use Turnitin to submit their assignments, but in CHK, we use another system called VeryGuide. And sometimes students will get frustrated because they are not familiar with those platforms. So they will keep asking a lot of questions, and they will just worry if their submission is successful or not. So I think this is an advantage of making things more standardized. It would be better.
Yeah, and I think we hear that as it's been voiced several times, and I think hopefully as more teachers across universities are willing to do online, that we can learn from different experiences. And I think speaking of going online, as we had mentioned in this previous panel with ongoing crises, whether it's just political unrest or even like health conditions with the coronavirus, I think like we could look at these situations as crises and interruptions to our normal schedule or in teaching and learning, but what are some opportunities for educators to see this crises as opportunities to like develop new and innovative teaching techniques and course designs? Like, what do you feel like are some of the mindsets that need to be changed in order for teachers to have that crises to opportunity kind of perspective?
Well, I'm a big believer in online access and open access education. So I see it as an opportunity to rethink our learner base, who's learning from me and how, and to expand it so that my students here on campus can interact with people who are from very different cultures or geographically, not in the same locations and what have you. So I see that as an opportunity to kind of open up the classroom a little bit more and open up education a bit more so that students who sometimes, they have a kind of narrow perspective. I mean, I really enjoyed the last panel because people were talking about, wow, going to a different university, it's so exotic for me, even just going across the harbor to go and, learn in Chinese U is so different than Hong Kong U or what have you. If that's an eye-opening experience for students, well, it's even more eye-opening if they go on my massive open online platform and they interact with students from Brazil or Mexico or from Europe or the US. So I think that this opportunity of opening up is important. Although it's difficult when you're forced into teaching online when you weren't prepared. That's the really difficult part of it because my course is designed to be partially online. But I really feel for my colleagues who are working now with the fact that, I expected to be on campus with this and now suddenly I have to go online. So, they might not have thought about, the differences in online teaching or the opportunities for different kinds of interaction with students than they had before, or different ways of thinking through things, even as simple as discussion, is really different online than face-to-face. So, I think that people, I would like to see eventually, I mean, if I had my way, I'd like to see eventually when people do their teaching training, when they come into Hong Kong U, we all do teaching training. If we had a segment on teaching online as part of that training, so that we wouldn't be blindsided by, oh gosh, I've got to go online now. And also eventually I think it would be useful for teachers to think maybe part of my course should be online because in the future, my students are going to go out in the world where they're going to be interacting more and more online. Maybe it should be a regular part of every class to have some sort of online component. So, but that's just my point of view.
I think one mindset that teachers maybe should pay more attention to is we need to empower students. We need to believe that they are future leaders, unless you admit or not, they are. And so instead of criticizing what kind of colleagues they lack of, we'd better help them to well prepared for the future's crisis. And now, although we have a lot of crises they face with now, but actually, in my opinion, they are facing problems that actually already exist, like the family issue. It's not directly caused by the crisis itself, but it has different consequences and make it even probably worse. So that's the thing we can do through our teaching. And for example, in our teaching, we honestly directly ask some of them, are you in the quarantine period? So they feel that they are being cared. And we answer, yeah, we too. We are giving the class in our home, at home. So you can see this is my apartment, this is my cat walking around. And so they feel that you're somebody really care about them. I think that's very important. Empower them and believe that they will be able to become future leaders.
Because the two constitutional courses we offer are seminar based. We emphasize a lot on face-to-face discussion, tutorial discussion. So my first worry is if everything goes online, it will be less ideal than we have a live tutorial. But you got to try, right? And things turns out to be quite okay. We have online discussions. We have this semester we have Zoom meetings, and as Dr. said, things progress quite well. And so I think we are taking a bit of risk here because we worry live tutorials will be better because they will have a more personal touch with each other. But we try to go online, and we try to we meet only 5 or 6 times in one semester. But I think it is better than we expect.
And along with that, I think empowering students or being willing to try new things. Were there any specific feedback from students that kind of stuck out to you regarding like how your course was conducted, that you feel like, okay, this is reinforcing what I need to continue to do in the future when I try to implement online or blended courses?
For me, we received feedback more focused on the content itself, not specific on the online experience.
I see.
We had some assignments to ask students, for example, to use a metaphor to describe what do you feel about this course. And some used lighthouse to give direction, because our course is about leadership quality training and to in the service society. So and they use different kinds of metaphor that really warm me. And so I make me feel that the thing I'm doing is quite meaningful. And also we collect feedback after each week's videos. It's not, they don't have to do it, but yeah, if they want to say something, they are very welcome to do so. So we can collect feedback gradually, not at the end of the course. That's very positive. And we also know that students would like to know more about how to improve themselves, how to dealing with conflicts with others, how to express one's idea assertively without hurting others' feeling. These kind of things they quite would like to improve. So we know that the soft skills we are teaching is quite something both the society and students need.
I think because the constitutional course will use KEEP model, and this is not the platform CHK use, and I guess not other university as well. So when we upload something onto the KEEP model, sometimes Dr. and I will make an announcement and send an email to students to remind them, because even CHK students, the habit is to check out what's updated in Blackboard instead of the KEEP model. So sometimes I receive some positive feedback. Thank you for reminding me. He or she almost forgot to check on something. And I think that's what we need to do more often.
Yeah, I agree. And as a matter of fact, that's something that I have a problem with some of my software is that, for Facebook you get notifications, for Twitter you get notifications, but for, Moodle, sometimes you don't get notifications. Or for some of the other software we use, we don't get the notifications. I know for the MOOC platform I use, which is edX, they don't have the notifications. So I would love to know when someone has gone to the platform and made a comment. That way I can go in and have a look rather than kind of let things go. One student, as a matter of fact, had an issue with the platform and, wrote in, and even though we check regularly, we hadn't checked, I guess, for a while. And the student said, well, why is it that it's taking you so long to get to my comment? Well, we have like maybe 20 discussion lines, and we don't get a notification when something's pinging on that line, on each line. So if we don't get that ping, we have to cycle through each one of the discussion lines to find out if there's some new material. So I really wish that people would just, think, okay, if it's a discussion platform, please build in notifications. You can always turn it off if you don't want it. But for the teaching assistants and for the instructors, those notifications are vital to be able to stay on top of student responses because they're so used to Facebook where they can get immediate feedback. If someone's pinging me on Facebook, I can go in immediately. So I really wish that the software developers would get on board here.
And it sounds like technology is a huge part of what we wish were, kind of keeping up with the mindsets and perspectives. I think also, like we mentioned, whether it's empowering students or even constant communication, I think that's just the general trend in the world today. I mean, it's so connected and responsive in different ways. And so I guess our last question is about universities as organizations and institutes. Like, since this is a cross-university partnership, what do you feel like universities as like just an organization can do to help equip teachers to and be more responsive to students' learning needs? I think Professor Marchetti, you were mentioning about having teaching training on online teaching, and I think that's a very good point. Like, are there other things that you feel like as a university it would be really helpful to provide educators with so that this kind of mindset can be better fostered for future, and especially since this is probably the trend moving on in education?
Yeah, I would love to see it sustained. And I really like the idea of the UGC allowing us to share resources and teach each other's students. I think this is a great initiative. And I think particularly since I know in our case, all of our courses are coming from our Common Core curriculum, which is something that's part of all of the institutions now when we move from the 3 to the 4-year curriculum. So I think that it's a perfect place because we don't have to worry so much about prerequisites and majors and going through a particular program since we all have some kind of common experience that's interdisciplinary in nature that all of our students are expected to take part in. So I hope that they do that, and I would love to see certain courses designated perhaps as blended learning courses so that I know that some of my colleagues have even more online than we have. I mean, we have mainly flipped classes, so students have to come in for lectures and tutorials as well. But I would love to do it if we could go more online so students wouldn't have to physically come to Hong Kong U necessarily more than a few times during the semester in order to take part in the course. If we could have a few more courses like that, it would be fabulous.
At the university level, Poly, you focus on application a lot. We are trying to not only focus on what people do, but also improve their soft skills to better prepare them. So I think for other courses, when they really need to do something, I think maybe that's a problem, an issue, a concern some teachers are facing because it's so difficult to demonstrate everything through the online videos, and students will get limited chance to do it by themselves. So because I personally don't have this kind of experience, but this just out of my mind, I think probably some teachers face this problem, and at the university level, they could provide more resources and support for teachers who teach these kind of subjects.
Yeah, I think it would be lovely if universities can provide more workshops because even for teachers making a video or other e-contents are not necessarily easy for us. And some teachers may even want to produce some subtitles for their videos as well, and that is not easy. And I think even for students who are quite used to use their mobile phone or something, will struggle because this is something new for them. And e-learning is something new for them, and even Zoom is quite user-friendly, and some students will still unfamiliar with the operation and the functions they can use. And so I think it would be great if universities can provide more support for both teachers and students.
Yeah, agreed. I think, too, people take for granted that students have more access, and reliable internet is something a lot of our students don't necessarily have. So when we talked in the earlier panel about self-selection for the students who are doing the cross-institutional experiences, they have to know, okay, I'm going to have part of this online, so I have to be prepared with a appropriate Wi-Fi connection and with something more than just my cell phone to, handle doing classroom activities. I think a lot of people don't realize that they think everything, all the software is appropriate for cell phones when it's not. So that's a big issue.
Right.
They do learn fast, but
They do, yeah.
we cannot assume that they know everything from the beginning.
No, not at all. It took me a while to figure out how to raise your hand in Zoom. So.
Yeah, so maybe some of that kind of support on the university's end, and I think sounds like having more unified support as well in technology. But
I think maybe too much resources are available, but we better have it organized in a systematic way so that we know where to find what.
Yeah, exactly. And what's appropriate for what circumstance.
Yes.
Well, I guess before we close, are there other last thoughts or comments about your experience in the Responsive4U project that you would like to share with our audience, or even have sparked discussion on?
Will we have the next discussion panelists? I think it would be very helpful.
Yeah, definitely find ways to look into that.
Yeah, I think keeping contact with students are very important because we are physically far from each other, and it will give them a sense of, okay, we are still caring about their study and other things. That's important.
Yeah, I think it's been a great initiative, and I hope we get going with it and keep it going, because I think it's important that we share our human resources. I mean, there are things we do at Hong Kong U that aren't done at other campuses, and there are things done at all the other campuses that we don't do at Hong Kong U. And it seems a pity if our students can't benefit from this amazing wealth of knowledge here.
Thank you so much for sharing and for joining us today. And for those of you tuning in, we look forward to hearing your comments on the website and for further discussion. Thank you.